So let's unpack this idea of what we need to be good at within communications. Okay, so if you're going to be a good communications director, there's a few basic areas that you just need to do well. Okay, the first one is to define wins for each campaign or every promotion. So this is a mistake that a lot of churches make, where we don't know exactly what the win is for this particular event. So again, when I was doing communications at one of the churches I served at, one of my questions that I would put out there to the director or the department head is, okay, what is the win for this event? Like, what are you hoping to take place at this event? And then a second question might be, what is the win for the promotions? Like, do you want a lot of people to show up? Do you want a lot of people to register? What is the win? So once we have a target to shoot at, then we can actually come up with a strategy and a game plan to communicate that target really well.
That's so good. And and that's the thing too. Is like even when you're developing people, right? And the reason why I keep going back on this idea of developing people is like part of being a good communication director is you never want to do it by yourself. You always want to be inviting somebody on the journey to do it with you, right? So this idea of like defining the wins, it helps not only you, but it helps everybody that's on that team, right? And when people understand like the target that they're aiming for, it actually increases the chances of them actually hitting that target. And I think what that also helps you do is this next idea of like help you simplify what you're communicating, right? Like when you have a clear target that you're aiming at, when you have a clear win that you're going after, then I know one of the issues with communications is that there's 100 things that you can say, but there's probably 99 things that you shouldn't say. Like let's just focus on that one thing, right? Let's just point to that one thing and then provide the next steps.
Yeah, so with the wins too, just kind of touching on that just for a little bit. If somebody on your team, like if you're building a volunteer team of photographers, if they understand what the win is, then they can make decisions based on that win. Like they don't have to come back to you and be like, hey, should I do this or this or this? They know what the win is, so then they're able to make decisions to get that win, to achieve that win. So that's a huge part of it. And then as far as like simplifying, the call to action is kind of the big thing. Like too many churches, they communicate a lot of calls to action, like, oh, you could do this, or you could do this, or you could do this. But the more options you give to people, the less likely they are to do something. And again, that's counterintuitive, but in communications world, in marketing world, the more options, the less action people take. There's a famous study in marketing world where there's a company that made spaghetti sauce, and they made like 27 different types of spaghetti sauce. And then they wanted to increase their sales because they weren't doing as good as they wanted to do. So the result was they got rid of every flavor except for three. And then when they did that, their sales skyrocketed.
Yeah,
So what they found is that because there were so many options, people didn't know what to choose and they didn't buy anything. They took no action. But when
that's
they
right.
simplified it, they're like, oh, do I feel like Parmesan or do I feel like basil? Well, then now all of a sudden people were able to make a quick choice and they bought
That's
the
right.
product. So that's one of the things, like keep it simple, communicate in a very, and then this might be, again, as a communications person, you might have to walk the people you serve, the people on church staff or that are leading as directors, you might have to walk them through this because it's not intuitive. People typically think, well, let's give them a lot of options on how to participate in this event. But what you need to do is drive home the idea of like, what is the one call to action as much as possible? Sometimes there are more than one call to actions, but as much as possible, how do we guide? How do we lead people towards one call to action people can take so they're actually more likely to take action?
That's right. And the next thing you need to be good at communication. I think this is kind of like one of the ones that we're all going to be like, duh, but it's this idea of planning in advance, right? Now we know the challenges of this. Like anybody that's been doing communications, we know that we've all tried to plan in advance, but there's the last minute sermon series on a Saturday night that you get the uh the voice of God spoke, so we need to change this whole thing up, right? So we understand that, right? But part of being a good communication person is actually helping your leadership even identify ways where you can put some barriers in place so you can actually execute well, right? What happens when you're doing things last minute is you drop the ball on major areas, right? So in my past, we've pulled the all-nighters trying to get things out for the Sunday, and we got it done, but it wasn't done well. It wasn't done with excellence, right? Because we didn't have the time to get it done with excellence. And the downside of that, the positive is, yeah, we got it done. The downside is if it's not done well, we lose a layer of trust with people, right? So that's one of the reasons why planning in advance is very important. So you can succeed with both creativity and I think Michael, you can touch on the idea of like stewarding resources, right? Like what happens when you're doing things last minute.
Oh yeah, yeah. You've probably been there where you're trying to order the print and then you have to pay extra because you're trying to get it here in 2 days instead of like the 5 business days that they normally do. So that's not honoring to the resources that God has given to the church to have to pay that extra. So if we're able to plan in advance, then we can honor, the resources that God has given to us, not only like financially, but also the people, like the volunteers, or maybe your other staff member that works with you. Like we need to steward them well. If we're trying to push them to get stuff done and they have to spend all-nighters trying to get it done, they're going to burn out.
That's
And
right.
sadly, I've been a part of those situations where I've seen creative people burn out within the church world, and they leave and they have a really bad taste of the church in their mouth because it's something that they were just pushed so hard all the time that they don't want any part of it after a while. So we need to
Okay.
steward well the people that God has given to us, as well as the financial resources that God has given to us to make sure that we take care of it. And also, I think as a communications director, like it's our job. Like we need to take the responsibility of helping our pastor or all the other leaders in the church understand what it takes to communicate well.
That's
Like
right.
we have to educate them on, I can't create a video in 2 days.
Mhm.
It takes me 2 weeks, like or more, it takes this amount of time. So in advance, it's our job to say, these are the rules. And listen, if you honor people, they will honor you.
That's
And
right.
you just have the right heart about it and just be like, hey, listen, we just want to do a great job. We want to help you win. And here's how we can help you win. If you need a video, awesome. We'll do a great job with the video. Here's what we need. We need at least 3 weeks for a video. Graphic design, okay, great. We need 5 business days to get that turned out. Whatever that looks like, you create the rules, but you put that out in advance. One of the things that I did as a communications director was that at the end of the year, around like November or something like that, I would try to get with every single person that was the leader of a department within the church. And I would ask them, okay, next year, what are all the major events? What are all the events? Tell me every event. And then I would actually ask them, is this a major event, lots of promotion, or this more of a minor event where you need just a little bit of promotion? So I actually created the playbook. I created the rules. And then I was the one that was being aggressive to say, hey, let's meet and let me get this information from you. And then let me serve you well. Because ultimately, I'm helping myself, not have to spend the all-nighters, or my team, if people are working with me, I'm protecting them by doing the work up front.
That's so good. And the thing is, when you plan in advance as well and you create those systems, it actually helps everybody else out because it forces other people to start thinking about things that they never even thought of, right? So with my pastor, I would be bringing things up weekly, or like, hey, we have this coming in a couple of weeks or in a couple of months from now. Let's talk about it, right? And one of the things that you'll hear us talk a lot, a practical thing that you can do is you can get your whole communication calendar within these things called seasons. If you're a Com Academy member, you actually have access to these kits that we create. But one of the things that we do is we tell churches to operate in seasons, because when you operate in seasons, it's a unified look that can be applied for multiple different sizes, right? So maybe there is a last minute graphic, but okay, we understand. But you can actually use a graphic from your season template, and maybe that graphic is not like the most creative graphic, and maybe you don't execute that person's idea all the way, but it gets the information out there. So I think operating in seasons is a great way of doing that.
So these ideas here, these three big ideas will help you to lead well, to create a culture within your church where communication is valued and it's done at a very, very high level. You'll notice that creativity will increase because you've got more room to be able to be creative. So I want to encourage you as a communications director, take responsibility and help make this a culture that happens within your church when it comes to promoting ideas and communicating events within the congregation or even beyond that inside the community.